Great morning, friends. Great morning, world. This is your boy, Dr. J.C. Dornick, aka The Dragon, coming to you with another live edition of the Make Sense with Dr. J.C. podcast. This live stuff is really, really interesting. And I want to hit on that like I typically do, because anytime I ever experience something that has worked for me, I want to pay it forward to everybody. So as people show up live or find this as a recording, just understand that the idea of me creating something that I think has value and sharing it with you is not meant for you to just gain access to it and know about it. It's really meant for you to put it into play and do something with it, like I have. And I'll share a little bit about that today. Great morning, Lori. So as you come in, like Lori just did, feel free to leave a comment and share, ask questions, say something nice, say something mean. It's all good. I appreciate everything. But today we're going to talk about really a couple of topics, but it's going to revolve around the idea of getting out of your own way. And I've prepared a podcast episode that I just think is going to be spectacular, and I can't wait to launch it. And it'll probably come out in a couple of days. But the episode is going to be called Flip the Switch: How to Get Out of Your Own Way and Into a Life that Grows. You know, that one of the principles of our private community, Make Sense Academy, is that we say that it's where confusion dies and progress thrives. So that kind of lends to that. And this is going to be about this surprising, bewildering shift that takes place when we move from a know-it-all framework, which, believe me, I know all too much about, to one that we call a learn-it-all framework. And that's going to help us unblock our career, relationships, and purpose. And we're going to reference in the background, just to shed color and also some of the work behind this stuff, the amazing book. I believe this book came out in 2007. It's up here somewhere in my books, but it's a book by the amazing Carol Dweck. Carol Dweck is just probably like just the queen of mindset. And she, if you ever get into this stuff about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, which is very much parallel to this idea of being a know-it-all versus a learn-it-all. This is the book, right? I mean, she's written a bunch of other books, but this particular book was in 2007 written, and it was just delicious. It's called Mindset: The New Psychology of Success. So it's funny in 2007 how that was considered the new psychology. So in any case, great morning, everybody. What we're doing here is we're going to take the information. This is kind of like a summary / cliff notes, just free flowing. Allow me to share what I love about it with you and spend, 20, 30 minutes, more like 30, and get you excited about, some things for the day, arm and equip you for the day. And once again, as people show up live, we're streaming to multiple platforms. Sometimes I don't even know what platforms we're on, but I know we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, and we might be streaming on Substack right now. And for that matter, I am an avid writer. It's part of my morning structure. I read a lot and I write a lot. And I have created an amazing blog called the Make Sense Substack. And I invite you guys to follow it. It's absolutely free. Some people do support us on that, but I write almost every day about just some interesting perspective shifts. I love to share some what I call good shift with people, and that's kind of my brand, and that's what I do in my social media and my Substack. So if you like the idea of getting something almost every day in your email that amounts to just like a 1 to 5 minute read that will just say, what if it was this way? And you'll get that through the Substack. So if you can't find it, you go to Substack, and it's called the Make Sense Substack, or just reach out and I'd be happy to give it to you. And once again, this is a live episode. It will live as a recording on YouTube, but feel free to ask questions, say hi as you come in. I see some folks that are here live. As a matter of fact, can you do me a favor if you're watching it live? Is just on whatever platform, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, or whatever, just throw a comment in there and just let me see if it shows up right here. I can see that Lori's is here. Just say hi. Tell us where you're coming from so I can say hi back. And once again, if anybody's read this book and wants to comment on that or has any experience with Carol Dweck, I'd love to know about that too. So feel free to just in the comments. And if you can't do that and you're saying, hey, we can't do that because it's not allowing us, well, maybe that's your lesson today to grow from. So let's talk about this. Oh, there's Julian. Great morning, my friend. Watching from Facebook. Okay, so it's working from Facebook. We know for sure. So great morning, everybody. So we're talking about this idea of getting out of our own way, but in this episode that I recorded, that's going to go on the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, and with the background of this, it's really kind of a twist. The idea of getting out of your own way, just think about what that means. That's something that I spent quite a bit of time. The first thing you would need to do is, in some way, shape, or form, identify that you're in your own way. That's probably the hardest step. That's a very frustrating thing to acknowledge that you are the problem. We spend most of our time blaming outside forces, right? So what I love about that idea is if you look at the difference, the parallel between somebody being a know-it-all versus somebody being a learn-it-all, and I go in depth into that in this episode. I'll share my personal story of how I discovered this and how by removing this desire that I had. When you're a know-it-all, you have this desire and it's a fixed mindset. And so that's where, Carol Dweck's book comes in, and she talks about the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. So without knowing it, you might have a fixed mindset. And you probably have a friend that you consider to be a know-it-all, or you might know somebody that appears to be a know-it-all. But if you're somebody that has made up your mind about certain things to the point where you put exclamation points behind them, in certain ways, you're a know-it-all as well. So we don't have to look at the idea of a know-it-all as just being a bad person. Rather, uncover the fixed mindset nature of being a know-it-all. So I go in to this in depth in the podcast episode, but it starts kind of with this question of why is it that humans need to know? Why do we need to know things? And furthermore, why do we need to know and let people know that we know? There's so much fascinating evolution behind that, because very often in our community we talk about the conditioned mind. Whatever you perceive in life and how you respond to things, what you think, your core principles, your values, all of that stuff, they're not really yours. You've gotten them from the paying forward of evolution. During the formative years, the first 7 years, your brain just accepted whatever your mother, father, teacher, preacher told you. That's where you got your religious perspective. That's where you got your relationship stuff and your ideas of what love is and all of that stuff. Even your political views were instilled. So they're not really yours. They were given to you. And then you proceeded for the rest of your life up until potentially right now, if you're having an awakening, to support what it is that you learned from the outside in. And now there's an algorithm created to make sure that you get that support. So the first step is to and this is the first step of what we call the interface response system, which we teach in our community. First step is to just acknowledge, right? Awaken. We always like to say that these episodes, these conversations, and the work that I do is really just arming people with awareness. If you're armed and equipped with the ability to become aware of things that you weren't aware of before, that's a massive power move. So one of the most powerful questions that I've been asking myself, but I also hand this question over, is whenever you find yourself in a fixed mindset, meaning saying that something is and there's no other, right? That's what a know-it-all is, right? It's like you're not even open to anything else. There's no discussion, and you protect that position. I love to ask the question in that moment when I catch myself doing that is what else may be true about that? Isn't that an interesting thing? So we teach people in Make Sense Academy and all the work and coming out of my book, this pattern interrupt that we arm ourselves with that just gives us a chance to even ask a question like that. And that would just be to make the sound, hmm. So as we, you know, go through our day, it's the conscious, wise person, the person that is open and curious and truly wants to grow, that allows themselves to dispute things, even the things that you are 100% right about. So why is it that we need to be right? What is this thing about the way that we were constructed, So I'll just read a little bit from the episode. Let's be honest, being right feels good. So that's the first thing. You know, don't think it's a bad thing, because if I ever say something and you go, yes, that is correct, that feels good. So it feels good, and it feeds my ego, and it kind of gives us what a lot of us are searching for, and that is certainty. And it actually temporarily soothes the chaos that is going on in the world that we don't fully understand. You know, we've been talking a lot in our community about control. If you don't understand something like what's going on in politics and world events and all of that stuff, or you see something, this is the danger of being in an environment where you're receiving information at random, like the news, scrolling and all of that stuff. If something pops up and you don't understand it, that gives you this sense of out of control, and it doesn't feel good. So it's natural that human beings seek to be right and to understand. We're understanding seeking missiles, right? But beneath the surface, being right is actually just a coping mechanism, if you think about it. This is something I never knew. I always wanted to be right because I thought, A, it felt good, but I thought that it gave me credibility, that people say, oh, he's right. That always felt good. But I started to recognize that it was just like a coping mechanism. And it was a coping mechanism that was addressing my brain's deeper fear of being wrong, the opposite. So think about being right feels good, but think about how bad and unsettling it feels when you find out you're wrong or you make a mistake. One of the things that I was always looking to avoid, and it's ironic because if you're a know-it-all, you make more mistakes. And you get more of this unsettling feeling when you put your foot in your mouth, you say the wrong thing, or you say something that you realize deep inside is complete nonsense. And it's only a very, very seldom small group of people that would admit that. Most people will take something that they truly inherently realize is nonsense, and they get that icky feeling, and then look to create a cognitive bias where they will reject anything that's different than it. This is the power of this thing that we have where we need to be right. We'll reject anything and anyone that is adverse to it. We'll actually call those things enemies, and we'll surround ourselves, maybe even start a cult of some sort, right? There's a lot of cults going on. Surround ourselves with people and things that justify it. So, you could start a movement today and say that the sun and the moon are the same thing, and they just appear differently. And maybe it heats up during the day and it cools down during the night. And somebody would hear that and say, that's preposterous. That's just not the truth. Or the world is round, or the world is flat. Whatever it is that you want to believe and be right about, you can find somebody or create a group of people that believe it too. Why? Because we all inherently want to be right. So I share in this episode a pivotal story, because if you're a know-it-all, you don't really know you are. You don't. It's interesting that you're a know-it-all, but you don't know that you're a know-it-all until you're confronted, with some sort of a wall that you hit, and that's typically what happens to a know-it-all. I had a situation where I finally sought out a mentor, and I give a shout out to Dr. Larry Markson, changed my life forever. And it was at a time where, I was probably perceived as a little bit of an a-hole, right? A little bit of somebody that you probably didn't want to be around too much, but I never saw it that way. But I wanted to succeed financially, and I sought out a mentor. And the reason why I sought this mentor out is because he looked like a successful version of me. Like I actually thought he was like me. I was very wrong. But anyway, so I sought him out and I basically said, I want you to teach me how to be successful like you, which was not easy because I was a know-it-all, and a know-it-all doesn't typically ask for help. But he asked me a couple of questions, and I'll give you the short end of it. But the first question he asked me that helped me see what was going on and the reason why I wasn't succeeding in relationships and success in business and health and everything, is he asked me he says, first question, what do you think people think about you? Now, how would you answer that question? If I asked you, what do you think other people, which a know-it-all immediately says, who cares, right? What do you think people think about you? And my answer was something like that. I said something like, well, I would say about 50% of people that I speak to or on stage or in person get me and like me, and the other half doesn't. And he says, well, what do you think of the other half? And I won't say it here live, but it was a word that started with an F, and it was F them, And he looked at me as if he knew I was going to say that, and he kind of crossed his arms and smiled. And then preloaded came the next question. And I'm just challenging you to identify and uncover if you're a know-it-all or a learn-it-all, or you have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, which is what this whole episode's about. That'll drop in a couple of days. New episode just dropped now on domestic violence, by the way. So go check out the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. Amazing episode with a special guest, Lindsay Abernathy from Bitch is a Bad Word, which is just going viral. Amazing. So in any case, the second question he asked me after what do you think people think about you, is he said to me, he says, what's more important to you, to be right or kind? And there was just something about that question that made my entire house of cards that I just so meticulously spent so much time to build to protect my insecurities and all of these problems that I had by being a know-it-all and being an ego-driven person. I recognized in that moment that I was spending too much time trying to be right. So I had to go through a process of, first of all, forgiving myself. There was a reason I was doing that. I was protecting this unresolved childhood trauma and all of that stuff. But what was so cool about it is it created a space. See, when you identify that you're a know-it-all or you have a fixed mindset, you're either going to run from it, you're going to either, fight or flight it, or you're going to embrace it because what it is that you want to accomplish is so important to you, right? And that's where I was at. I wanted to succeed and be happy and have relationships and love and money and free time and be a better dad and all that stuff. I wanted that stuff bad enough that I didn't fight what he said or run from it. I said, holy beep. And I recognized that all I was ever doing was trying to be right. And that created this space where I said, well, what would it look like if I chose, instead of being right, to be kind? Now, that would mean that I would listen more, I would care more about others, I would seek to understand versus be understood, all of that stuff, right? Which is very hard if you're wired the other way. But it was the beginning. It was the beginning. And that was a pivotal time in my life. And I shared it with you because you can learn about a fixed mindset and a growth mindset and convince yourself that you have a growth mindset because you're doing personal growth and you want to grow and all of that stuff. But a true growth mindset, and if you read this book and you listen to this episode when it comes out, is really one where you realize that not only are you not right, but there are so many other things out there that might be righter, right? You start using words like maybe, or I don't know, could be, might be. So it's the open and curious person that is in position for the most growth. And then Carol Dweck also reminds everybody why, another reason why we are so adamant on having a fixed mindset. It's a protective mechanism, to be a know-it-all and say this is this and not entertain anything else, um, is a way of avoiding the truth that if you want to grow, there's a sacrifice of hard work and failure, lots and lots of failure. I saw a quote today or yesterday that I just love that I added into this episode that just says, Remember, you're not failing right now. You're just in the part where most people quit." Right. So there's a very big reason why there's so few people sitting at the top of the mountain at the table called success. It's because it requires a lot of work with the perception of no return on investment. And it's just not a fun, comfortable ride to success. It never will be. And if you ever comfortably find success, I mean, just look at every story of anybody that just comfortably found success. The only person that comfortably finds success and keeps it is somebody that gets comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? But it's always uncomfortable, and that's why so few people have it. So if you look at the idea of truly growing, being open and curious, allowing your ego to be checked and just identify the possibilities of anything. Say maybe, to be like a scientist. A scientist is not interested in being right. They're always interested in what's better. When a scientist proposes a theory that he spent years and years, maybe even his life, and then another one comes and gives a better, more accurate theory, this scientist gets excited about that. So that's the growth mindset. I thought I had a growth mindset because I was in personal growth and I wanted to grow. But what I didn't know is that I had a fixed mindset because I had some rules about how it would have to happen, and it would have to be all about me. So that's what this book will help you really, really identify the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. But this idea of getting out of your own way, it's a really funny thing. It's more of an excuse and a coping mechanism than anything. A lot of people will have that written on their tombstone. This idea of saying, I spent my life trying to get out of my own way. You're not actually in your way. Rather, what I found, my observation with myself and others, is that I actually placed myself in the way to protect me from something. So it's not that I was in my way. I needed to ask a different question: is what am I avoiding? And peel all the layers off of that. And you'll always find yourself reverting back to this place where you're avoiding responsibility, right? Nobody's coming to save you. Your happiness, your joy, your success, any single person in the world, me included, you included, can decide right now on something that they really, really want, that's super sexy and valuable. And it's got to be, because it's got to be more important than your excuses. But you can decide right now what you want and identify the things that leverage it by looking at people that have accomplished and achieved what you want, and go get it. It's going to be hard. It's going to suck. You're going to fail more than you succeed, but it's 100% certain that you will get it if you go at it like that. So this idea of getting out of your own way, maybe that is just your way of protecting yourself from that work. Everything that we desire in our, the utopia and the proverbial dream life that we have, is just sitting on the other side of work and thankless work and failure and all that. So you can see there, that's a big part of it, is a fixed mindset. And, this idea of being a know-it-all, it's a protective mechanism that's protecting you and keeping you away from the harm of success and growth. So that's a big, big distinction. I go over one of my favorite analogies, that our brains are like right protected SD cards. When you wake up in the morning, most of us just let yesterday's program boot up. And if you look, on the side of an SD card, that we're recording to right now, you'll see there's a little switch. And when it's in write protect mode, it means that it's protected from allowing anything in. So right now, the SD card that I'm recording to has that write protect mode off because it's receiving the recording that I'm doing right now. So if your write protect switch is on, it means that you've done that on purpose to say, I don't want to hear about anything else. I'm right. So think about that person that's out there doing, and not getting any results. But rather than saying, well, maybe there's a better way, or maybe, I should take a left instead of a right, or maybe I'm the problem. The reason why they won't do that and they'll keep their write protect switch on is because they're probably inherently afraid of failure. As you know, the saying goes that, our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. We fear not only failure, but even more so success, the overwhelm associated with it. I love that. So, so many nuggets in here. I share an interesting story about Microsoft. Microsoft was at the top, and then they went to the bottom because they had this way of grading their employees. What did I call it? I think it was called stack rating. Yeah, stack ranking, where they would basically incentivize if you were the top performing employee, meaning better than the rest, you would get the raise and you would get the praise. So the problem with that is the people that were at the top never shared their secrets with anyone else. They wanted to hoard them so that they would always be at the top. So Microsoft's numbers went down to the point where just the iPhone alone did more profit for Apple, just that one product, than all of Microsoft. So this new, CEO comes in, and what was his name? Satya Nadella. And he comes in and he creates what he calls a learn it all environment. So he had to have those egotistical people, put in check, because he said, like, hey, listen, we want you to share your productive secrets so that our mission can grow. So he created a different grading system, that was based on overall profitability. That's how everybody won. So the people that had the secrets of growth shared with everybody, and it created a learning environment. And sure enough, Microsoft rose way back up to the top. So I go over that, and I also go over the acknowledgement of how we're in just this crazy, fast-changing world where nothing is happening slow. It's very hard to be able to just slow the process down and identify what some things that you're doing that are just incongruent. So we use the interface response system, and I go in depth into that in the episode as well, where we acknowledge and perceive all this stuff. We place a pause on it. We say, and we challenge and we dispute things, and we create space to be able to have some of this thought process of identifying that you're drifting back into a fixed mindset. Not that you're the problem, but you're the thing that needs to change, nothing outside of you, right? And we know why all that stuff is happening. A couple of interesting perspectives I'll close with. This would be the idea of moving from you saying, this is just how I am, to that's how I've been, but I'm now open to who I could become. That's a good one. Or they just don't get it. I used to say that a lot. To maybe they see something that I don't. Isn't that a cool one? Or I already know this. And then change that to, let's see what I missed last time. Always open and curious. Or even just, I disagree, to interesting. Tell me more. I'm open and curious. So this goes from a personal level to a global level, and I highly recommend reading this book. If you're not already subscribed to the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, check it out. We're almost at 200,000 downloads a month, and it's just insane that it's growing, and we have advertising and all that stuff. And it just means that people are ready and open and willing to step into the arena of play, of growth. And if you want to check out the Make Sense Academy, just always reach out to me and say, make sense. We'll send you information on that, and you can join our community where we actually do this work. And, Love and appreciate you all. This has just been a little bit of a fun summary, just going live and giving you the raw how I'm feeling about this. But make sure that you look out for that episode when it comes out. It'll probably come out in my Substack newsletter as well. And definitely check out this book. It's an oldie but a goodie. And then once you read her book, you can read the rest of them because they're all accents on that. Love and appreciate you all. You have an amazing day. And remember, if you learned something today, give it away. Right? Put it into play and give it away because that's the way it's going to stay. Love you. See you next time. Bye-bye now.